So in this video, I'm going to quickly show you the concept of how volumes work in the Docker Swarm here. So just to give you a quick overview, I created a few different nodes here. One of them is the manager, and the other ones are two worker nodes, a large and a small. The important concept here is that each node has its own disk. And at the moment, Docker Swarm does not have the concept of persistent volume claims built in to the orchestration tool. So that means that data that's on the disk that's attached to this node is not available to, say, the container that's running on this node. And if you did want to be able to access the data that's on the disk at this node, you would have to do so by communicating from this service to another service that's running on that node, just through the shell or something like that. So that's how you would be able to access data on different disks on different nodes. But yeah, in this video, I want to make it clear as to how volumes are set up. So you can go ahead and configure your application. In this case, I created already some volumes. So I'm actually going to uh, just really quickly show how you create a volume mapping for, say, like a database that's going to run in the swarm. So let me just delete that. So we're going to create a new volume, and we'll call it database. And this is a volume mapping, so no data has been created. No, nothing in the disks has been written yet. But if we go over into our services, we spun up a Docker DB service. And this is actually just using the public Postgres image that's available on Docker Hub. So right now, at the moment, there is no data mapping. And so any data that would be written at the moment to this service would just simply be assigned a random volume that's not backed up. So this volume, for example, is a random volume, and it's created only temporarily while that container has been created. And so we're going to map now a volume here to that service so that it persists throughout the lifecycle of the container and beyond. So services, Docker database, and let's go ahead and update it. And because we're using Postgres, we know that the Postgres data is actually stored at a certain target path. It's right here. This is just well documented knowledge about using Postgres. So I want my database volume, which I'm going to call database, and then it's going to map to this directory. And so once I update this, the volume is going to restart. Okay. The service is going to restart here. Okay. Great. Okay, there it is. And then if we go into the volumes here, we can now see that the database volume is being used by the Docker DB service. So I did the same thing. I created a volume called store, and I'm using it by this service called app. And if we go into it here, we can see that I ended up creating just a path on the local disk called my files. I mapped it to this volume called store. Okay. So now that that's been done, if we go over into just into the overview here, we can see that that Flask application, I'm running two containers of it, and it's running on these different nodes. So here's the concept of volumes kind of at play. So if we go to volumes and we are to upload a file, let's say that we just wanted to have like this logo file on a disk. I want it to be in the volume called store, and I want to run it on this node. I know that this node is the second one, the large node, just by knowing the IP address. And if I go ahead and upload it, here's what my expectation is. So my expectation is that the data or that file will only be available on the disk of this node. So it should only be accessible to this Flask demo container. And that would mean that this one doesn't have access to that data uh, at the moment, unless I were to communicate through another container. So I can verify that by going here into the app, and let's start the shell. So if I just check out our directory, let's go back, and we see my files here. Okay, so if we go into my files, because the service has been now uh, configured to have a volume directory called my files. If I go into my files and I check for data, there's no data on this specific disk. So what it means to me is that that container is actually running right here. There's definitely an opportunity to improve the labeling of the containers, but this that container that we SSH'd into was actually running on this node, and so that data wasn't available. But if we go into the service here, and we go into this next container, which we know is going to be running on the node that has the disk where we just uploaded that file to, we can go back and we can navigate to my files. And sure enough, there are two files. This is one from just a test that I did earlier, and then the other one that we just uploaded right now. So that data is available through the service now. So the expectation now is, let's say we do something like this, and we all of a sudden say, okay, well, we want our Flask demo container to only run on, say, this one machine. This is the one without the data on it, okay? So let's create a label, and we'll say app is true. And so now this label has been added to this node. Let's go in and also update this service. And we're going to say we only want this service to run on nodes where labels is app equals true. And so if we go back to the view here, we can see that it spins off this node and that we have a service spinning up here. So now just to prove that we don't have access to the data on this disk right now, we can go in to the service, and we'll do this for both, but let's just go back and let's go to the My Files directory, and there's no data there. And let's do the same thing here in the other container. And there's no data there either. Now here's where things get interesting. So let's, this was a service update, okay? Let's add now a label here on this node. And let's say that app is equal to true on this one. And let's delete it off of this other node. So now we've switched the label to be on this machine. So the expectation now is that the Flask application is only going to be running on this machine. And sure enough, the containers move over. So if we go here into the app and we go to the shell and we check here, the files have persisted. So this is the way that you're going to want to set things up to be able to make sure that volumes are persistent, that they stay on the node. Of course, they're not available from any node on any service. You'd have to communicate through other containers to get access to the data on a specific disk on a node. But this is definitely the concept that you need to utilize is volumes, getting data into those volumes, and then knowing which disk has the volume upload to it. So I hope that helps. Check it out and maybe a second time to just see through the tutorial again on this. I realize that there's a lot of content and it comes pretty quick, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Just respond to us at support@medstack.co, and we're happy to help with any requests. So thanks very much.